my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course, and man, I am so damn excited about today's show. So I know I had mentioned last week we were supposed to have a guest to close out Financial Literacy Month. Unfortunately, she had to reschedule. Now, shout out to her for being quick with the turnaround and finding another day to record. And now I get to bring you the episode that I was planning on. So we have CEO and founder of Luz We Trust, Linda Garcia, hopping on the show. She just wrote an incredible book all about investing in stocks. So we're going to talk all about that, kind of financial literacy to a degree, financial literacy sort of in general, I think, and just, I don't know, being a disruptor. I'm excited to just talk to her in general. I've heard so many really great things about it. I know a lot of you follow her, are fans of her content already, so I'm really excited to bring you this episode. And without further ado, let's hop into it. Let's bring on Linda Garcia in our Mi Gente segment. Mi Gente. My guest today is the founder and CEO of Luz We Trust, host of the Let There Be Luz podcast, and author of the new book, Wealth Warrior: 8 Steps for Communities of Color to Conquer the Stock Market. Linda Garcia, how you feeling?
Good. Dramos, thank you so much for having me here today and amplifying the book. I appreciate it.
Of course. I mean, you're doing such important work. And what's funny is when I was asking some of my followers, like, any particular questions or tips that they're looking for in regards to financial literacy, and we'll get to that later on in the show. But some of them began to guess who I was having on the show, and they actually brought your name up. I guess they were familiar with the book and had been reading the book, and they're extremely excited to hear you on the show. So it's a really kind of beautiful synergy that I think is happening.
That's dope.
Absolutely. So I want to kind of first and foremost kind of set the background, though, for anybody who might not be familiar. I know in Luz We Trust, the brand, and you describe it as an initiative to help communities of color and children of immigrants understand their relationship to money and leverage their resources to invest. Let's dive a bit deeper into that, though. I mean, as far as the work that you do, and also I think more importantly, how you even kind of got to this place right now where you felt like, comfortable enough to have this discussion and really make this your life's work.
Yeah. I mean, honestly, it's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of fear behind it because, as we know, we've only really seen old white dudes talk about this stuff, because I'm not talking about like investing into an index fund. I'm not talking about 401k. I'm talking about direct ownership into stocks, which right now, as it stands, there's only 15% of Americans that are direct ownerships of stocks. And out of those 15% that are actually participating, 90% of them are white, 1% are Black, and then 0.5% are Latino. So it's an intimidating topic to take on, but I started to get more and more passionate and maybe like pissed off, to be honest, as I started to understand it and was like, no, fuck this. Someone needs to talk about this. And I've been doing it and practicing it for what I felt was like enough time to be able to at least lay the ground for the basics.
I love that. So what were you doing prior to this, though? Like, what was kind of the life you had before talking about wealth and making this your life's work?
Yeah. So I was actually in media, television, radio, and film. I worked for Lionsgate, and I was doing marketing and publicity for motion pictures that were niche down for the Latina community. And then I got into Netflix. So I started working at Netflix when they first started their Netflix Originals initiative. So I understood that this tech company was going to turn into like a movie studio per se. And when I worked in the tech company, that's when I really understood the abundance of capital and just money flowing into the system. But prior to that, I had like extreme scarcity mindset. I was constantly struggling, like living paycheck to paycheck. And it was clear to me that a lot of the way I lived my life and the way I handled money and the amount of money that I received was tied to like deep rooted scarcity mindset. The way I watched my parents work and navigate this country really affected me. So I started to see the correlation between being a child of immigrants, living paycheck to paycheck, also feeling intimidated working at a tech company. Yeah, so that's kind of where it started.
I love that we have a very similar sort of, I think, background. I want to pick your brain maybe a little later on the transition that you kind of made, but I think first and foremost, starting with the mindset that you recognize in yourself as far as limiting beliefs around money and the things that were holding you back. For you, can you pinpoint a couple things that you think you've seen are kind of the most specific challenges that impact communities of color specifically when it comes to money?
I think for us, it's like always looking in, like from the outside looking in terms of wealth and abundance. For a lot of us, our parents work in the service industry. And so they're always like serving people with much more money. So I think there's like this obviously like subconscious clear divide in our mind that that's them and like this is us. So I think that's one of the biggest things that impact us, like deep seated impact. And what was the question again? Sorry, Dramos.
Oh no, you're fine. I was saying with the biggest sort of obstacles that are specific to our community as far as money and sort of this this scarcity mindset that we talk about, the fucking fear of money in general. You know what I mean? Like there's something that's very unique, I feel like, to our communities and communities of color in general that doesn't affect, like we've talked about, white families and the way that they've kind of grown up thinking about money.
Yeah, I think it's that being the outsiders looking in, the deep-rooted scarcity that we have, watching our parents and the type of work that they did, how many jobs they worked. I know, like for my parents, they worked a multitude of jobs. So you start to equate like making money to having to work hard. And in this country, it's actually the opposite. Those that work harder are more impoverished versus those that have the mindset to work smarter and leverage money and leverage time. So I think that's one of the biggest setbacks. Obviously, the most common setback is not having financial literacy embedded into the education that we receive here in the United States. But I think those two things coupled together is like a perfect experience for us to be sort of held back and see the results of the wage gap that we're currently experiencing here in the States.
Yeah, no, I think you're hitting on a few different things. That idea of being an outsider looking in. And I think it's also the idea of like, we're just brought up by people who are constantly in survival mode almost. You know what I mean? So it's like, they don't have the luxury to learn about like how to, manipulate your credit score, how to use the points in your favor to bring up your credit score or, kind of what percentage you should be saving or whatever it might be, and I can only speak to, my own experience, but, towards the end of their careers before they retired, my parents were making decent money. But the problem was that as they began to make more money, their expenses would go up. So we still were sort of always living paycheck to paycheck because they never learned how to properly save or invest, their money. And it's almost like at times I think it's this mindset that we have because we've seen suffering for so much, because we've grown up in the struggle. We oftentimes kind of want to take the easy road to like look like we have it all together rather than actually taking the hard road that it takes to, actually build real wealth rather than the one that, comes along with like a name brand, handbag or something like that. I'm curious if you've kind of touched on anything like that as far as oftentimes our overspending or our sort of, materialism that happens, I think, just trying to keep up with the Joneses.
Yeah, I mean, I go into that, but I also have a really different perspective on that I think some people might be really surprised by, because I feel like a lot of folks in the space, they really drive home like budgeting and like saving money. And I feel like there's also a scarcity mindset in that space. Like, yes, obviously we have to be conscious of our purchases, but I also want to see like our communities living nice. I want to see us having nice things and not necessarily sacrificing, moving from one type of sacrifice to the other. So I also dive into like an abundance mindset and like, yo, if you want a nice handbag, that's all good. Like, I'm not here to judge, and I don't want anyone judging me if I have a nice handbag either. I think that there's ways for us to like work smart, you know, from a completely different perspective and have those nice things. Like we're you know, that's our birthright too. We're allowed to have nice things. We don't have to just, you know, cop what's cheap. So that's kind of my perspective in that space. I think that there's room for us to really use our minds in different ways. And like, yo, if you want to be wealthy, if you want to have a mansion, there's a way for you to do that, you know? Obviously, every path is unique and every path is different. So that's kind of like my take on that. But simultaneously, I think that just like we want nice things, we also have to understand what ownership means in this country. And so there's like 3 ways to develop generational wealth. That's by opening up your own business, becoming an entrepreneur. And the second way is real estate. And the third way is the stock market, which is like what I truly want to be a resource for in terms of direct ownership, because we understand entrepreneurship to a certain extent. Like a lot of families here are entrepreneurs, and we understand real estate because we have family members or our family have purchased real estate. But what's not discussed is direct ownership in stocks.
Yeah, and I wanna definitely get into stocks because that's an area that I haven't even personally really felt ever comfortable diving into. You know, real estate and things like that have been more made sense to me. But I do kind of on that topic though. Do you personally have your own sort of calculator as far as mentally when you want to treat yourself to something? Because I do agree we all deserve to be, you know, living the life that we want to live. But how do we do it in a responsible way that like we know we genuinely can afford it and it's not going to fuck up our long-term plans that we have for ourselves as far as building this generational wealth that I think we're all striving for?
Yeah, I think for me personally, if I have to buy it on a credit card, I'll use the credit card for points. But if I can't pay that card at the end of the month, like free and clear, then I truly can't afford it. That's just it for me, you know?
Yeah.
So if I want those nice things, I have to save for them. I have to be able to purchase them at the end of the month. And then I want to still be able to be free and clear and have additional cushion at the end of the month. Like it can't be just my one purchase and then I'm at ground zero. So truly for me, it's like not purchasing it on credit, but having the cash free and clear.
I love that. I think that's a really good kind of methodology to go into. So let's now dive into stock markets, right? Let's talk about, you know, investing in all of that. What are kind of the basics that you began to learn? Because like I said, for me, it always feels like gambling when I have dabbled in it, right? I'll watch it, you know, it'll go up and then it'll go down. And then I'm like, fuck, I'm losing my money. I need to get the hell out.
Yeah.
You know, so there is this like fear. There is this, you know, I don't know, this idea of I don't know how the fuck to play this game, or do I even have the stomach to kind of handle the ups and downs of it? You know, so what kind of were the first things that when you began to dip your toe into the stock market and investing that you began to kind of learn to break free, I'm sure, some of the mindset of fear and scarcity?
Yeah, well, the first thing I want to make really clear is that if we don't know the language of the stock market, it is just like gambling, right? We're just kind of putting money out there and hoping it sticks. And then, like you mentioned, not having the emotional capacity to move through that. So I think the very first thing is really understanding the language. As you know, like the reason the barrier of entry is so high, is so big, is because we don't understand the language. So for me, I think understanding the language is first and foremost like the basic knowledge that you should have before walking into this system. And then the second part is understanding your relationship with money. So what I love about the stock market so much is that in real time, you can see your relationship. You can see your scarcity mindset. You can see your issues like immediately. And if we really think about it, like we look at the way the chart moves, the United States stock market is one of the most powerful stock markets in the entire world. And so those movements are really a compilation of emotions of some of the most wealthy people around the world. So that's a normal part of the process. But what I think is really beneficial when you first start is to identify what those emotions feel like, the fears that you're feeling. And to start, you shouldn't be investing so much money that you're like those emotions can lead towards something much more serious, or you're losing big amounts of money. Because like you mentioned, when the stock market comes down, people do start to panic and they start to sell out. And what's important for us to learn is to stomach that. So one of the biggest things I share in our community is that you need to be able to first emotionally disconnect with the amount of money that you're going to start investing. So I think for starters, it's important to get an amount. And Dramos, it doesn't matter if the amount is $20 a month. Like that's irrelevant. It should be an amount that you're emotionally disconnected from, because you're not going to learn the stock market overnight. You're not going to learn about it in a year. You're not going to learn about it from reading one book. Like my book is perfect because it lays out the land. It's like a map for you to get started, but you're going to start to learn as you move through the process. So you disconnect with an amount emotionally, and you understand that as you move into the space, you're going to learn. So you start with however much money you want to like emotionally disconnect from. And then there's the other component to that also gets a little convoluted, which is picking the stock, right, that you want to invest in. That's a big responsibility, but like anything else, it's really easy to pick what phone you want to buy. It's really easy to pick what computer you want to buy. It's really easy to make those decisions. And a lot of the times it's the population as a whole that's picking those decisions. So I think the most important component is understanding that you want the company that you're investing in to have massive consumption by consumers. So it's really not that challenging to identify once you understand that you're just buying into the system that you've been buying in all along, but now you're looking at it from an owner's perspective.
Sure. And as far as like stock, I know there's different strategies for investing, right? You can kind of go company by company. You can sort of just do where it has a group of sort of types of companies and you're investing in that. That's particularly, if I'm not mistaken, a safer route, right? It's smaller returns, but you also lose less money. What do you kind of think is the strategy for anybody starting out, or what should they be kind of weighing when thinking, should I be far more aggressive? Should I be playing it safe, long-term, short-term? What are kind of the mindsets, the check boxes that they should be having, before deciding what strategy they want to take in investing in the stock market?
Yeah, so I typically like to lay out all of the different types of strategies that exist, so that as like you as an individual, you can pick out the strategy that you feel best suited for. And I think that starts to evolve once you start to invest. But for me personally, and I think this is also because I've had exposure to tech companies and I understand the power of disruption. And I also have a pretty good concept of the way capital works within a tech company. For me, I'm looking for disruption. That's what I'm looking for, because that's more of an aggressive approach. I'm very comfortable in the tech space. I think it's the future, obviously, right? For so many sectors, not just the tech sector per se. Like we have technology that has taken over real estate. We have technology that has taken over healthcare, technology that has taken over the way we move from home to go out to dinner. Like we have Uber. So there's like the technology is hitting all types of sectors. But for me personally, I want to be invested in a company where I see disruption in the future. That's my personal approach. But in the book, I talk about different strategies because I don't want anyone to use my strategy specifically. I want for people to discover their own personal investing journey from themselves. I'm not going to be there at night to be like, yo, it's okay. Don't freak out about being an investor in Tesla. Like, I'm not going to be there.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think it's a good sort of disclaimer to have for people, because I think you hear a lot of financial advice, particularly on social media, be it real estate, be it Wall Street, be it any of these things. And we have to also take into consideration, you can be inspired by somebody's story, by their strategy, by the advice that they're giving you, but you also have to make it make sense for you, right? And, I had somebody talking about real estate recently on the show, and it's the same thing of, do you have the patience to be a landlord? Do you know all the headaches that come into it, right? Some people love doing real estate and having tenants and all these things, but you have to be the type of person who's okay with all of the headaches that come along with, having tenants and having to deal with the issues that come up from people living in these properties. So again, it's I like what you're saying is this is sort of what's worked for you, and you can kind of give people the ins and outs and what options they have, but you also have to make it make sense for your own personal life. So I love that disclaimer. Now, I want to kind of touch on a few things that you had posted on social media, a couple conversations that you were having. One that stood out to me was you were talking about the difference between the way men and women approach money. So I'd be curious if you can kind of expound upon that a little bit.
Yeah, I think that there's this emotional approach. I think for women overall, like we've been really, it's a safe space for us to have intuitive decisions. Our decisions can be intuitive, but they can also be so much more emotional, where men are just more logical in the way they make decisions overall. So they might be less emotionally tied. Not that they're not emotionally tied, but less emotionally tied to certain decisions. Like they just see the path and it's clear. And so I think what makes women really powerful is their ability to be more connected to intuition, to be more connected to like a feminine type of movement. And I think that becomes powerful in investing as well, because there's intuitive nudges that you get on what you think you should be investing in. But then it's important for you to take a logical approach so that you're backing up your intuition with actual data and logic. And I think that makes for a really powerful component, is to have your intuition backed by data. Then it really allows for you to be confident and strong in the decisions that you've made. A lot of the times when we're moving in much more masculine spaces, like money, like investing, we'll get questioned a lot or feel intimidated by a man, bringing up questions. And I think what's really made me feel confident enough to write a book about it is understanding the data, understanding the history, and really being a student of the market. But what drove me to the space was my intuition.
Yeah, and it's interesting because we talk about the things that are uniquely kind of setbacks to communities of color, but then on a deeper level, I'd imagine as a woman, there's even more kind of to explore in that field, because you talk about the traditional household where you had generations of the past where the man would work, the woman would kind of keep the home, and the guy was the one handling all the finances and the breadwinner and all of that kind of stuff. And obviously we've began to shift, and women have been taking back their power. But I'd imagine there are some beliefs that are kind of deep rooted just from generationally, be it your elders, that sometimes might seep through as you're trying to build this life for yourself, as far as, finances and wealth, and step into these spaces that are traditionally more masculine.
So I want to talk about that a little bit, because
Sure.
There is ancient history. It's in the Bible. It's in different cultures. If you go back far enough, there is something called a red tent. And in the red tent, this is a time where women were believed to be so much more connected to intuition, which was the time during when they were on their periods. And societies, when they had issues, like tribes, when they had issues, what would take place is women would bleed together. All the women would go into a tent, and because we're so connected in our cycles, we had less electricity that was swaying our circadian rhythm. We were all in sync. They would place the women in tents, and the men would protect the tents to make sure that the women weren't getting attacked from another tribe. The men would turn and give the women list of problems that needed solving. And they would hand over those problems to women because they believed like they can connect to God even deeper during this time. And so let's see what the women come back with. Women would then come out of the tent and they had like kind of solved for a lot of these issues. So they would work together in the space of like trusting women's intuition. It's believed that that's why men then went on to sacrifice like animals and humans because they wanted to receive that power from like the blood of sacrifice. I know we're getting super deep here, but I think it's interesting. I think it's interesting how, you know, even in history, it's been recorded that, you know, we've sort of leaned on women's intuition. And so I think that there's so much power from the masculine and the feminine. And when we step into the feminine space, what that can mean and how that can help the masculine. And when there's the masculinity, what that can mean for women in support, vice versa.
Yeah, no, and I'm happy you bring things like that up because I think when we talk about limiting beliefs, obviously, I think there's a conversation about colonialism, right? And the poison of that and how we've sort of forgotten about the power of our ancestors, be it the, you know, indigenous tribes and things like you're talking about the common practice as far as the place that women had in a society. And we've sort of haven't been brought up understanding that power or recognizing sort of our own royalty and even if you just look at, you know, I'm Puerto Rican, but you look at the Taino Indians and like the inventions that they had that are still used today, you know, it's this idea that that's all been erased and we have to, you know, kind of find our way back to that power that we had, you know, and I think that that's kind of, I think a lot of the struggle that we have as a community. And particularly when you look at even like the census and all these things, it's like, man, we have, you know, we're, you know, something like I think is, I don't know if it was 18% of the population. We have like the seventh largest GDP if we were our own country, you know, Latinos living in the US. But we aren't like represented in that way, like you said, when it comes to people on Wall Street, when it comes to, you know, billionaires, when it comes to fucking Hollywood or media or any of those things. And it's like we have to kind of just break through this noise that we've been taught by those that, you know, kind of persecuted us for a while and then also have just been the ones writing history, I think.
You know, I think that I've been working in media, television, radio, movies for well over 20 years. I'm 43 years old. And I have been in the space where I have always been fighting for media to represent us, like boots on the ground in meetings, you know, speaking to people. And I've always had this, like, we're on the brink, like we're on the brink. And out of my entire career, I finally, right now in this moment, especially within the last couple of years, I feel like fuck the brink. Like we're opening our eyes. Like we're truly the sleeping giant. And we just started opening our eyes. I mean, let's look at, you know, what's happening, what Bad Bunny has accomplished and what Peso Pluma, all of a sudden out of nowhere, you have white people singing, like, you know, talking about compa. And it's just, you have, you know, Becky G and Selena Gomez, the most followed person on Instagram. I really think that we're in a position of power right now. And I don't want to sound like egotistical or anything like that, but all of our work matters. Like your work is a contribution to the space that is opening up. My work is a contribution to the space that is opening up. And with the 2008 recession, working in media and publicity, marketing, and the development of like local television commercials, the first thing to be cut during that recession was any media pertaining to the, you know, what we call in the space Hispanic demographic. And I really feel that in this recession and where we are right now, if any company tries to cut or discount like who we are and start to center what they call general market, which has been compiled of white people, that's going to be the biggest mistake ever. Like now you have no choice. You have to center us as general market. You have to have a Latina playing Wednesday. You like there, it's over. And I think we're like we're like in the beginning stages of that. And I'm super pumped for it. And I think like having a resource for women, Latinas, for Latinas in the space that just wrote a book is also like a really big testament to that we're losing our fear and we're coming in correct on a new level.
Yeah, no, I mean, you're speaking to my heart right now. You got me fired up with with some of the talking points, but I couldn't agree more. I mean, it just feels like it's undeniable at this point, where we're just like fucking kicking down the door. And I think we have to keep that pressure. We have to keep our foot on the gas and supporting, when people like yourself release a book, when, artists release music, when a movie is made, a show is made, like we have to continue to kind of go out there and show support. And then also, do our part creating a space wherever that, sees fit for us, be it sharing other people's work or creating our own work that represents our community is obviously a very important type of thing. And I think that's what I've related to as far as, I used to be in mainstream radio. I was on air at a top 40 radio station. I was a producer of a giant hip hop radio show, before all of this. And for me, it was like, enough is enough. I'm not seeing the representation I want. I need to start something of my own and figure that out. And I'm curious for you. This is what last thing I want to kind of touch on was, obviously for you, I'm sure to a degree there was some sort of similar feeling working in brands like Netflix or in media in general, where maybe you felt like you're not getting deep enough into what you feel like is your work to a degree, or what should be your work.
Yeah, man, it was everywhere I've been. It's been a freaking fight. Like it's been a fight. And I'm like, I used to be in gangs when I was younger. Like, I'm just going to keep it 100 with you. So for me, like I'm still a chola. Like put me in a room and it doesn't matter if I'm in a button-up shirt or what the fuck. Like I'm going to say what I feel from the heart. And I think that was one of my biggest things at Netflix, and is like speaking up for my space in spaces where, you're not supposed to speak up. And even though it was scary and I was afraid to lose my job, there were things that I was able to change. Like there were things that were, I mean, pivotal for the company. Like because of me in a meeting speaking up and aggressively after a couple of years where I was just like, I'm done. They implemented Spanish subs and dubs in the US. So that was single-handedly my effort in standing up and like, no, this is what this community needs. We need to be inclusive and make sure we have content that's for them as well. Like, so I feel like it's always been a real fight. And I've always done my best to leave my mark, speak what I need to speak, not hold back, not allow for anyone to muzzle me despite the consequences. And I have paid consequences. I mean, I was let go. Eventually. And, here I am, like, I'm still out here talking shit, I'm still out here but now it's my platform and no one can tell me anything and no one can let me go. Only I can let me go.
No, I fucking love that. You know what I mean? Like it's I left my job, but I didn't leave on the greatest of terms. So I can definitely understand that. And it was like this idea where the machine couldn't understand how I wasn't impressed by their accolades from the past. And I was more interested in disruption, like we've been talking about, and being a representative for something that was actually important to me. And the machine doesn't like that. They don't like when you push back. They want you to just be happy to be there, right? And they tell everybody this person's fucking crazy because they are pushing against this, and they think because they put you in a room of celebrities and they tell you how important your work is that that's all to kind of keep us trained and to keep us sort of on the assembly line. And it's like we have to again break free of that mindset of just being happy to be there. It has to be more than that. We have to be more want more for ourselves and more for the people that are looking up to us. Who are hoping that, they can be in our position one day or create something of their own one day. So yeah, I know I love this whole conversation in general, your kind of attitude and being unapologetically authentic, even if it's in a room that doesn't necessarily welcome that.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. And thank you for your contribution. I feel like this work is so important and so needed, and we need to show up authentically. Because that's what sells. Here's the thing. Like, I think we nothing was able, like the giant wasn't waking up because we had white people telling us how the giant should behave. And that shit wasn't resonating with us. We're like, that's not like, we don't need to say, I eat tacos. Like, just eat the fucking taco. You know what I'm saying? Like, we don't have to like narrate our, you know? And so I think like what is happening now is like, we're authentically showing up. Like, no, I'm not going to show up the way you're telling me to. This is the way I'm going to do it. Like we recently I had my book signing at Barnes and Noble, and one of the women was like, do you think you can even get 25 people to show up? And I had this moment where it was like, I was back in freaking, you know, white corporate, whatever and I'm sitting there and I thought to myself, like, what if I can't get 25 people? I really genuinely saw that as a problem. Like as an issue for me. And, you know, we got way more than 25 people out there. They had to turn people away. And I was like, I want a mariachi. Like, that's what I want to walk in. I want a mariachi. I want to serenade those that show up for me. And they're like, they've never had a mariachi at Barnes and Noble. And they're like, we've never had a mariachi, you know? And they're like, why? I don't know why we never did this before. And, you know, it was like so dope to just like, you know, see the whole audience just like get up and everyone is just like singing together. And you could just see the white people like, what is going on right now? And it was like me showing up authentically. They're not going to think about me bringing a mariachi. They're not going to, that has to come from us. Like those ideas and that space and drawing boundaries on like, I'm going to show up and show up as I am. I think that's what pays off. And it was such it was an emotional moment for everyone that was in the space. And that's the type of things that are selling. Like now there's a little girl that watched me do that. And it's nothing. It's not something that she knows she's going to have to fight through. She saw it happen already with her own 2 eyes. You know what I'm saying? So
yeah, 110%. I think like it's, you know, the Bad Bunny example you brought up is perfect because I talk about this all the time, but traditionally Latin artists had to make an English album in order to cross over to the mainstream, right? They had to rewrite like Mark Anthony had to re-release his album in English in order for him to then become the star that he was commercially. And Bad Bunny, unapologetically speaking in Spanish, unapologetically speaking about, you know, where he's from in Puerto Rico, you know, and then becoming the biggest artist in the world while doing so 100%, you know, being himself. Like that's the page we all have to be looking at, you know, like fuck out all the other noise of the past and everything like that. Like that's proof right there. You don't have to change for anybody as long as you're walking in your purpose and you're creating something great. Like greatness is always going to break through. And now, you know, like you said, it's knocked down the door for every other artist to come through and be able to be authentically themselves. And it's such a beautiful kind of moment to be a part of for sure.
Yeah, I'm so curious to see, like, this might be controversial, but I wonder, like, if Bad Bunny didn't do the song with Grupo Frontera, would have Peso Pluma, like, been, like, I feel like Peso Pluma, like, he had a quantum leap experience.
Right.
And I feel like, just from my perspective, this is my truth, my belief. If you don't agree, that's okay. But I feel like Bad Bunny performing with Grupo Frontera, like, I mean, I could talk about this forever, but I just feel like he literally just like swung the whole door open for, you know, this young dude, Peso Pluma, who's always freaking admired him, who loves him. Like the way that we are waking up to ourselves and we're starting to see the possibility of quantum leaping and like having maximum exposure is wild to me. And it like literally it makes me shake inside, like, because I'm like, what is happening? What is like, I see this big transition all over TikTok. There's white people singing in Spanish. They don't know what they're talking about. You know, I'm just like, it's amazing.
Yeah. Well, 100%. I mean, even for me, like I'm a Puerto Rican from New York. So, you know, traditional Mexican music is not on my radar. You know what I mean? Like I didn't grow up, you know, around Mexicans, like primarily it's Puerto Rican and Dominican where I'm from, right? But Bad Bunny doing a song with Grupo Frontera, like I was just, you know, listening to that today. Like, and I was literally just like, this is a vibe. I was into it, right? So it's like bringing us all together and unifying us in a way that we haven't before, because that's also like the machine of like this country loves to kind of keep us all divided. I'm Puerto Rican, so the Mexicans issues don't really affect me. And that's how they kind of separate our power. But us coming together and recognizing that we can, have common interests. And when we come together, it helps all of us, that's the type of sort of messaging that I think is so powerful right now that you're seeing, that goes beyond anything we've seen previously, when you had people like Daddy Yankee and Tego Calderon, when that reggaeton wave that happened. This is why this is so much bigger, because now it's bringing in everybody a part of the conversation, rather than just like the focal point being on one island and one particular group of people.
Yeah, just the ability to see that. Like, I grew up, I was born in 1980. So like for me, it was like Snoop Dogg and NWA and, of course, loving East Coast music as well. And so like my heroes, like the people I watched growing up, were Black people. I'm very influenced by Black people. There's a lot of Black artists in my book that I quote. And I just think it's so fucking cool that like our kids, nieces and nephews, they're going to get to see people that sound like them and look like them being influential and opening the spaces. So yeah, it's dope.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I could talk about this for like another 4 hours, but we'll kind of come to we'll go to a close here with a couple questions, if it's cool with you, from some people via social media. So I got a bunch of responses. I'll just read a few small ones, but let's see. At DJ Spirito is asking, how do we get insider trading tips like politicians who seem to always know when to buy and sell? I think more so this is probably, where are you going to get your resources as far as maybe seeing what the next thing you should be looking at is, as far as investing in stocks?
Well, there are a lot of applications where you can get the daily trades of politicians. Like you can get Pelosi's husband's trades. All of those trades are made publicly, so you can definitely access that. But I do want to empower us to not just like follow the trades of what other people are making, but sort of assess the space. All the time that I've spent in this space, it blows my mind how much easier it gets to understand and have a good grip on the pulse of the economy. And I really think like that's what's going to propel us forward, is if we really move towards understanding the space. I've watched so many of our community members get super passionate about it, and like it comes naturally to us now. It comes easy to be able to see like, oh, there's a crisis in Italy called COVID. It's only a matter of time before that crisis is going to make it to the United States. We're not dependent on media to tell us that. You start to be able to assess those things on your own.
Yeah, I love that. Let's see. I got a couple more here. At Nicolosa_Vega says, should I be contributing more to my IRA or to regular stocks? To my regular stocks, she asks. And of course, this is just your opinion. This is not real financial advice that anybody should be resting their livelihood on. We'll put that disclaimer. But what are your thoughts
entertainment. there? Entertainment only, for sure. I think you should definitely be maxing out your IRA. So definitely contribute the most that you can. It like caps at like 6,500. Definitely talk to your CPA about that though, because if your CPA isn't educating you on these types of moves and how it can save you on your taxes, then you don't have a CPA that's on your side. So make sure you have a CPA that's continuously educating you, because they will be able to see where you should be contributing more in order to save taxes. So that's first and foremost. Once you max that out, then I would say, then if you still have the budget and the space for it, then look into direct share contribution.
Love it. All right, last one. At TJ Charity is asking, with some CD rates above 5%, are they a good investment?
So I solely focus on the stock market, but a 5% return on an investment is a great investment. I mean, we saw rates as low as like 0.1% a couple of years ago. So I think a 5 guaranteed return is a great opportunity there.
Love it. Well, listen, Linda, I appreciate you. The book, Wealth Warrior, 8 Steps for Community of Color to Conquer the Stock Market, is out right now. Where can people follow you, check out all that you got going on?
Yeah, you can follow me on my personal Instagram at Luz Warrior, Luz Warrior. And then you can check out our community at In Luz We Trust.
I love it. And just as a fan of the conversation we were having, I would love to hear you one day speak about more of the disruption and kind of not letting not hiding your inner troll out when it comes to these buttoned up corporate meetings.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, I need to write a book about that because I have a lot to fucking say.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Man, big shout out to my guest this week, Linda Garcia. Go check out that book, Wealth Warrior, that she put out there. I've been hearing amazing things from what I've read in it. It's just incredible. So I'm going to definitely have to pick up a full copy for myself. But man, without further ado, let's kind of tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow in a segment we call Conclusions Stew.
Time for conclusions stew.
All right, so we dove into a lot with Linda and just the idea in general of like stocks and trying to break ourselves out of this fear of the unknown, I guess you will, right? And I'm speaking for me personally. Like, I've done some investing in stocks. I played around with it a little bit when that whole AMC thing happened. I made a couple bucks with it and then got out very quickly. And since then, I've kind of been like in and out constantly, just not really knowing what the hell I'm doing, just trying to figure it out. And in speaking with her, I'm kind of motivated to really deep dive into it a little bit more and learn about it and figure out some strategies on how I can kind of get my slice of the pie. And I think that's the bigger conversation, is that we as Latinos, we as communities of color, have been left out of these conversations for far too long. And a lot of it is that fear of the unknown, of doing something different. And like we talked about, kind of looking from the outside in, you know what I mean? And watching as other people do it, but never feeling like it's something we can achieve or something that we could participate in. And it's about breaking that mindset and pushing yourself to take advantage of the opportunities that are out there in the same way that old white people have been doing for generations, right? And it's the idea, I love what she talked about, how rich people have figured out ways to work smarter, not harder, right? And I love that as somebody who's in my adult life held multiple jobs at the same exact time, and some not because I love doing them, but just because I was, getting pieces here, pieces there. I love the idea of figuring out a way to not have to stretch myself so thin and be able to find a little bit more balance in life, which I think is what we're all sort of chasing. And then second to that, I really just love the idea of disruption, that conversation that we got into. Like, I love being authentically you, even in spaces where it's not the norm, where people are maybe not super open or receptive to it. It's being unafraid to take up space and knowing that you're working for something bigger than yourself. And that's what Linda has created, and that's what I hope I'm creating with this space. And I can relate so much to her kind of having to fight to have her point of view heard. And the idea that like we're having this moment, this movement with Latin culture where we really are just fucking doing it and everybody else is trying to hop on board, and we just have to keep this momentum going and keep creating, keep elevating one another, keep coming together. And it's just really, really, really beautiful. And, I don't know. I just get fired up when I hear these types of discussions, when I see somebody like Linda, creating their own business and then making sure that they are in service of their community. It's obviously something that I relate to, something that I strive to do on a regular basis. So I'm very inspired by it. I hope you were inspired by that conversation as well. And man, with that said, thank you all for tuning in. My book, Just Be.nyc, the Street Stoic podcast, all that is out right now, wherever you find podcasts, and on that website, justbe.nyc, if you want to pick up the book. And that's it. I'll catch you Thursday for Thursday Trends, of course. Until then, be safe, and we'll talk soon. Peace.